I thought the worst pain was burying my father. I was wrong. The worst pain is standing in my black funeral suit, looking across the street, and seeing my husband. He was supposed to be in another state for an emergency meeting. Instead, he was raising a glass and handing roses to another woman. He lied to skip my father's funeral. And that, I realized, was just the tip of the iceberg. My name is Alara. I am 38 years old, and I am a risk analyst. My job is to see the cracks in things before they shatter. Standing outside the funeral home in the thin Denver air, I realized I had missed the seismic fault line running directly through my own life. The cold bit at my cheeks, a weak echo of the numbness inside. I had just listened to my uncle deliver a eulogy for my father, praising his unwavering honesty, his integrity. Each word about his honor felt like a personal indictment, a fresh layer of pain pressed onto the raw grief. Dad was the most honest man I knew. And I, his daughter, was standing here, alone. Marcus should have been beside me. My husband was not here. He was, according to his very apologetic, very stressed phone call 2 days ago, in Chicago, an emergency meeting with a Keystone client, a can't-miss deal that he claimed was tearing him apart to attend. "It's the absolute worst timing, Ellie," he'd said, his voice gravelly with fake regret. "I'll move heaven and earth to be back by tomorrow night. I am so sorry, baby." I'd believed him. I'd told him I understood. Because I did. Or I thought I did. Marcus was an architect. Ambitious. Driven. His work at Urban Edge Designers was his life. Often more so than our life. I felt the familiar ache of his absence. A dull throb of loneliness I'd long accepted as part of the package. I told myself he was doing this for us. So I stood there, taking the sympathetic, pitying glances from relatives, explaining his absence with a practiced, tired line. Work. You know, Marcus. I needed air. The scent of lilies and formaldehyde was suffocating me. I stepped away from the black-clad huddle by the door, past the gleaming hearse, toward the sidewalk. The city noise felt wrong, too alive. Across the street, the world continued, oblivious. Cars passed. People laughed as they walked into the Crimson Quill. It was one of those absurdly expensive restaurants, the kind of place you go to celebrate, to close deals, to impress. Its warm, golden light spilled onto the cold pavement, a stark contrast to the somber gray of my side of the street. My eyes just drifted, scanning the windows, seeking any distraction from the hole in my chest. And then they stopped. They locked. My breath caught. It simply ceased to exist. There, at a window table, framed like a cruel painting, was Marcus. He was not in Chicago. He was not in a rumpled travel suit, looking stressed. He was wearing his best charcoal gray vest, the one I'd bought him for our anniversary. His hair perfectly styled, and he was smiling, not just smiling, beaming, a radiant, 1,000-watt smile I hadn't seen directed at me in years. He was not alone. Across from him sat a woman, a stunning woman with hair the color of spun gold, wearing a dress that was definitely not funeral attire. As I watched, frozen, Marcus leaned forward. He said something that made her laugh. A bright, carefree sound I could almost hear through the glass. Then, he reached down and produced a bouquet. Not just any bouquet, a massive, obscene spray of velvet red roses. He presented them to her with a flourish. The world tilted. The sounds of the city faded, replaced by a violent, rushing sound in my ears. It was a joke. It had to be a mistake. A look-alike. My hand, slick with a cold sweat, fumbled for my phone. It felt like it weighed 100 pounds. I raised it, my fingers trembling so badly I almost dropped it. The lens swam, trying to focus. I stabbed at the screen. Click. The image was blurry, but undeniable. The lens captured the precise moment Marcus raised his champagne flute, his eyes fixed on her. In a toast. A buzzing vibration came from the phone still in my hand. A text reminder. My hand moved on its own, navigating away from the camera, opening my messages. There, at the top, was the last text from my husband, sent just 3 hours ago. Flight just landed in Chicago. My heart is with you. Love you. I read the words. Landed in Chicago. I looked up. Marcus. Not in Chicago. Took a sip of his champagne. My heart is with you. I looked at the roses in her hand. Love you. The grief for my father didn't disappear. It crystallized. It morphed into something else entirely. A new feeling, cold and brutally sharp, pierced through the fog of sorrow. It was a feeling I knew well from my job, the cold, clear click of recognition when a potential risk becomes an active, catastrophic failure. I stood on the sidewalk, in my black dress, the eulogy for my honest father still echoing in my ears. I had just buried one of the 2 men I loved most in the world, and I had just discovered the other was a lie. I had not just lost my father. I had lost my marriage. And the betrayal, I knew with chilling certainty, had only just begun. I put the phone back into the pocket of my black wool coat. The photograph was a hot, toxic weight against my hip. I turned away from the restaurant, away from the image of my husband's smile, and walked back into the house of the dead. My feet moved on their own, carrying me up the steps. The second I passed the threshold, the mask snapped into place. It was automatic. I had not realized I was even capable of it. My Aunt Sarah clutched my hand. Her own eyes were red and swollen. Oh, Ilara, honey. You look like you've seen a ghost. I just needed air, I whispered. My voice sounded strange, hollow. Of course, dear, it's all too much. Your father. He was such a good man. I nodded. I accepted the hug. I felt the wetness of her tears on my shoulder, but I had none left of my own. My grief had flash frozen. What remained was something hard, dense, and heavy. I was a machine, receiving data, the sympathetic squeeze of a cousin's hand, the muttered, "I'm so sorry for your loss." The pitying eyes of my father's old business partner. They saw a daughter shattered by loss. They were not wrong. They just misidentified the loss. They saw grief. What they were actually looking at was rage, cooled to a temperature that was near absolute zero. My mind, the part of me that I use at Summit Scope Solutions, began to run calculations. The emotional Ilara was offline, shut down. The analyst was fully engaged. Problem husband, Marcus, is engaged in active deception. Immediate risk, financial instability, reputational damage, known variables. 1. He lied about a business trip to Chicago. 2. He is currently dining at the Crimson Quill. 3. He is with an unidentified blonde woman. 4. Roses and champagne are involved. Unknowns. Who is she? How long has this been happening? What is the financial scope of this deception? Next step. I need more data. I need objective, verifiable facts. I excused myself, moving toward the quiet family room at the back of the funeral home. The scent of coffee and old furniture hung in the air. I pulled out my phone. My fingers were steady now. I dialed. She picked up on the second ring. "Chloe, bad time." Her voice was fast, already distracted. "I need a favor," I said, my voice low and flat. "And you cannot ask me why." Silence on the other end. Chloe, a cybersecurity savant who lived on caffeine and ethical breaches, understood that tone. It was the tone I used for critical. "Well, what do you need?" "I need you to check flight manifests. Denver to Chicago. Any airline for today or yesterday. The name is Marcus Paxton." "Okay, easy. What else?" "The joint Amex. I need a list of recent charges. Anything from the last 48 hours. Specifically, I need to know if there's a charge from a restaurant called the Crimson Quill." I heard the rapid clack-clack-clack of her keyboard. Alara, what is going on? You're at your dad's funeral. You promised not to ask, I said. The typing stopped. Fine, but I do not like this. I will have answers in 20 minutes. I hung up and slipped the phone away just as my uncle walked in. I spent the next 2 hours performing the role of the grieving daughter. That night, the house was a tomb. It was too quiet. The silence was suffocating. I had not slept in what felt like days. I was lying on top of the covers, still in my clothes from the funeral, when my phone rang. The screen flashed, Marcus. I stared at it. I let it ring 3 times. I took a breath. I answered. Hello. I made my voice sound thick with sleep and tears. Ellie. Oh, baby. I am so sorry. I was just calling to check on you. How are you holding up? His voice. It was perfect. Full of fatigue, layered with concern, heavy with the burden of his work. I'm tired, Marcus. It was awful. I know. God, I feel terrible I was not there. This meeting was it was a nightmare. We were at it for 12 hours straight. I think I am finally making headway with the client. It was touch and go. He was good. He was a phenomenal liar. He provided details. He talked about the stale air in the conference room, the bad coffee, the specific objections from the client. He was building an airtight alibi. I'm just so tired, I repeated, cutting off his monologue. I just want to go to sleep. Of course, baby. You sleep. I will be on the first flight back tomorrow. I promise. I love you so much. A pause. I had to say it. I had to complete the circuit. I am glad your work went well. Marcus, I said, my voice perfectly pitched to sound exhausted and supportive. I do not know what I would do without you. Good night, Ellie. Good night. I hung up the phone. I did not cry. I did not scream. I opened my text messages. The message from Chloe had arrived an hour earlier. No flights booked to Chicago under his name, or any other city. He never went to the airport. The Amex, however, got a big one. The Crimson Quill, charged 2 hours ago, total $642. Also, a charge from last week, Zales Jewelers, $4,000. Happy birthday to someone. I closed the text. I opened the photo, the cold, clear image of my husband and the blonde woman. I stared at it. I zoomed in, past Marcus's lying face. I focused on her, the perfect blonde hair, the expensive-looking earrings, the way she smiled. My mind churned, sifting through thousands of files. I had seen her before. It was not just a passing glance. She was familiar, not a friend, not family. I stared at her face, burning every detail into my memory. This was not just an affair. This was a complex, expensive, and insulting operation. And he had made a critical mistake. He had underestimated me. The next day, Marcus flew home. He walked through the door right on time for his scheduled landing, pulling his carry-on bag, the picture of an exhausted and devoted husband. He dropped the bag and opened his arms, his face a mask of weary concern. Ellie, he breathed, pulling me into his chest. I let him. I buried my face in his shoulder, inhaling the scent of his cologne, a scent that was not mixed with the stale, recycled air of an airplane. He smelled fresh. He smelled like him. I am so sorry I was not here, he whispered into my hair. It was hell. I never should have gone. Shh, it's okay, I murmured, my voice muffled. You are here now. I pulled back. I looked at his face, the tired eyes, the slight droop of his mouth. It was a masterful performance. I was a scientist observing a specimen, cataloging its behavior. Every word, every gesture, every calculated sigh of exhaustion was a data point. He made me coffee. He rubbed my shoulders. He took care of everything. which meant he sat at the kitchen island on his laptop while I fielded calls from the cemetery and the lawyer. My phone buzzed in my pocket. A text from Chloe. Okay. I dug. The Crimson Quill charge was on the joint Amex, just like you thought. $642. But that's the appetizer. I found another charge, a recurring monthly payment. $15,000. Every month, for the last 6 months. Billed to Cherry Creek Prestige Holdings. My blood ran cold. Cherry Creek was the most expensive, exclusive neighborhood in Denver. It's an apartment lease. Alara. Chloe's next text read, a penthouse. I'm sending you the address. I watched Marcus. He was frowning at his screen, the picture of a man under pressure. These Chicago clients are relentless. He sighed. You poor thing, I said, my voice smooth as silk. I needed to get into his home office. Marcus, I started, my voice wavering just enough. I have to start going through Dad's paperwork, his estate. I do not even know where to begin. I was going to use the guest room, but... He looked up, his eyes full of practiced sympathy. Ellie, no. You take my office. It's the quietest room in the house. Take all the time you need. I will just work from the kitchen. Are you sure I do not want to be in your way? Do not be ridiculous. It's your house too. It's your house too. The lie hung in the air, thick and oily. An hour later, I was sitting at his large oak desk, surrounded by my father's legitimate, honorable life in neatly stacked folders. Marcus was on a conference call on the patio, his voice a low, earnest murmur. I was not interested in my father's papers. I was interested in Marcus's. I started with his drawers. He was meticulous, everything filed, but I was not looking for files. I was looking for anomalies. In the back of his bottom desk drawer, underneath a roll of old blueprints, I found it. A small, sleek black key fob and a single high-security key. It was not for our building. It was not for his office at Urban Edge. It was for the penthouse in Cherry Creek. In his adjoining closet, tucked away on the top shelf inside an old shoebox, I found an empty, pristine white box, the new iPhone, the $1,200 model. He had told me just last week that they should be tightening their belts until the economy improved. I sat down at his computer. It was locked. I knew his password, or I typed in our anniversary. Password incorrect. I tried his birthday. Password incorrect. My mind raced. What did he value? What was his real passion? I typed in the project code for the Reynolds Tower, the big client he had won last year. Access granted. I did not have much time. I did not need to look for emails or messages. He was too smart to leave a trail like that. I navigated to his networked drives. And there it was. Not even hidden, just separate. A folder named Projects, Personal. I clicked. My breath hitched. It was not a project. It was her. Dozens of pictures, candid photos, selfies. Her at a beach, her in a robe, drinking coffee. Her at the Crimson Quill, raising a glass of champagne. The same woman, the blonde. My mind finally clicked. I had seen her, in industry magazines, at company galas. She was Isabel Vance, a high-profile, social media famous interior designer. Her face was plastered all over Instagram, with 1.2 million followers, and she collaborated, constantly, with Urban Edge designers, with Marcus. I found her Instagram profile. I scrolled. Pictures of neutral-toned, million-dollar living rooms, and then a photo from 3 weeks ago. At an Urban Edge design gala, Isabel Vance, in a glittering silver dress, standing next to my husband. His hand was not just on her back, it was low, possessive. The caption, creating magic with the absolute best. So excited for what's next. Marcus Paxton. I felt the bile rise in my throat. This was not a secret. This was a public humiliation I had simply been too busy grieving to notice. But the final twist was not in the photos. It was in a subfolder. I almost missed it. a folder named MP Acquisitions. I thought it would be design-related. It was not. It was not love letters. It was not more pictures. It was bank statements, scanned PDFs. From a private wealth bank I had never heard of. An account with one name on it, Marcus Paxton. I clicked the most recent statement. My eyes scanned the page, my analyst brain taking over, reading the numbers. And I saw the transfers. A transfer in from our joint checking account. $50,000. Dated 3 days ago, the day my father died. A transfer in from our home equity line of credit. $100,000. Dated last week. A transfer out. To Isabel Vance. $25,000. Labeled Design Consult. He was not just cheating on me. He was robbing me. He was using my father's death as a cover. He was draining our life, our future, and funneling it into his. The click of the patio door sliding open made me jump. I minimized the window just as he walked in. "How is it going in here?" "Ellie?" he asked, his voice soft. I turned in the chair, my face a perfect mask of tired sorrow. It is just a lot," I said, gesturing to my father's papers. "It is going to take a long time." "Well," he said, coming up behind me, placing his hands on my shoulders, "you take all the time you need. I am here for you." I felt his hands on me, and for the first time, I understood what it meant to feel true, unadulterated hatred. Grief is a powerful shield. For 3 days, I moved through my house as Alara Paxton, the grieving widow. Marcus was suffocatingly attentive, his performance flawless. He brought me tea I did not drink and soup I did not eat. He fielded calls, his voice a perfect blend of sorrow and strength. And all the while, I was building a file. But data collection can only take you so far. To understand the true nature of the risk, you have to do a stress test. You have to poke the system. I needed to meet Isabel Vance, screaming at her, pulling her hair, throwing a drink in her face that was the script for a different kind of woman, a different kind of story. That was a play for emotion. I was interested in leverage. I needed to know what she knew and what she was capable of. I used a burner phone. I booked a 1-hour design consultation at her prestigious downtown office. I paid the $500 fee up front. I did not use the name Alara Paxton. I used the name I was born with, Alara Thorne. Her office was exactly what I expected. It was a sterile, minimalist temple of beige, white, and brushed gold. It was featured on her Instagram feed just last week, captioned, "Where the Magic Happens." It was beautiful, expensive, and had all the personality of a luxury hotel lobby. Isabel Vance was the same. She swept into the glass-walled conference room 10 minutes late, all clicking heels, expensive perfume, and apologies that did not sound genuine. She was even more striking in person. Her blonde hair was perfect. Her teeth were perfect. She looked at me with the bright, appraising gaze of a salesperson. "Alara Thorne," she said, shaking my hand. Her grip was firm. "So good to meet you. I am just swamped. Now, you said on the phone you are looking to redesign a large residential space." "Yes," I said, keeping my voice calm and low. I slid a file across the polished marble table. It contained blueprints, not for my home, but for a property my company, Summit Scope, had recently analyzed. A full renovation. It was a recent acquisition, and the aesthetic is dated. We talked about fabrics for 15 minutes. We discussed Italian marble versus quartz. She was good. She was professional, knowledgeable, and utterly fake. I watched her, the woman who had laughed with my husband while my father's body was being eulogized. I felt nothing, just a cold, analytical focus. "The budget is significant," I said, leaning back. "So I am being very careful about all the partners I bring in. I am in risk analysis. You see, it is my job to worry about the downside." She smiled, a polite, vacant expression. "Oh, I am sure you will find we are a very safe bet. Ms. Thorne." "I hope so," I said, letting a slight frown touch my lips. I am just getting nervous about investments in general right now, especially in the Denver creative scene. It seems so volatile, so many big egos, so much risk. I let the word hang in the air. She shifted, just slightly. I am not sure I follow. I was just looking at a collaboration, I said, as if it were a casual thought. A friend of mine mentioned Urban Edge designers, specifically, one of their partners, Marcus Paxton. She said he was brilliant. Isabel's posture changed. The easy, rehearsed professionalism hardened. Her eyes, which had been scanning me for a potential commission, now focused, sharp, and defensive. Yes, he is brilliant, she said, her voice a little too tight. But, I prompted gently. But what? I apologize, I said, lowering my voice. My friend. She just mentioned, well, she implied he was maybe a bit financially incautious. You know the type. A brilliant artist, but not someone you trust with the checkbook. The reaction was immediate. It was not the reaction of a mistress. It was the reaction of an investor. That is not true at all, Isabel snapped, her smile vanishing. Marcus is a visionary. He is a genius. People who do not understand his vision get nervous, but that is their failure, not his. He is on the verge of something revolutionary. There it was. The word visionary, genius. The exact same words Marcus used to describe himself when he was trying to justify an absurd expense. She was not just sleeping with him, she was investing in him. That $25,000 design consult I saw in his secret account, that was not a payment to her. That was a payment from her. He was using our stolen money to look rich, to rope in investors for a visionary project. And his mistress was his primary mark. I stood up, gathering my things. Well, you have certainly given me a lot to think about. Your portfolio is lovely. I hope we can work together, she said, the polite mask back in place, though her eyes were still cold. We will see. I picked up my purse, my file, and as I did, my hand accidentally knocked a small, silver USB drive from my coat pocket onto the table. It slid across the marble, stopping right in front of her. Oh, goodness, I said, feigning embarrassment. Silly me. My files. I paused, my hand halfway to it. Then I stopped and looked her right in the eye. My whole demeanor softened. I gave her a small, sad, woman-to-woman smile. You know, I said, my voice quiet, confidential. My ex-husband. He was a lot like that, a visionary, a genius. He also turned out to be a complete con man who drained every account I had. I really hope you never have to go through anything like that. I left the USB drive on the table. You have a lovely day, Isabel, I said. I walked out of the conference room. I did not look back. I did not need to. As I crossed the reception area, I saw her reflection in the glass partition. She was no longer looking at me. She was staring, hard, at the USB drive on her table. Chloe was already tracking it. The bait was set. The drive back from Isabel's office was silent. I did not turn on the radio. I just drove, my mind a cold, quiet void. I was parking in my own garage, sitting in the silence, when my phone rang. It was Chloe. I answered. She plugged it in, Chloe said, with no greeting. Her voice was flat, hard, the voice she used when a breach was not just a game, but a felony. Isabel Vance, she plugged the USB drive into her laptop not 5 minutes after you left her office. And I am in. The spreadsheet was, as requested, a masterpiece of boring data on real estate trends. But the tracker embedded in the macro is a thing of beauty. I am bypassing her firewall. Now, I have got access to her main drive. What are you looking for? I asked, my voice a whisper. Anything with his name on it. Marcus, Paxton, Urban Edge, Alara. Her voice changed. The professional excitement was gone, replaced by something dark. Alara, This is not just an affair. I told you that. But this is embezzlement. This is a whole new level. What did you find? I said, gripping the steering wheel. I started cross-referencing his accounts with yours, like you asked. I did not just look at the joint Amex. I looked at everything you two share, and I looked at your dad's estate. A long, terrible pause. Alara, he has been stealing from your father's trust fund. I could not breathe. What, that is not possible. I am the executor. I am the only one with access. Are you? Chloe asked, her voice dangerously quiet. Did you give him your passwords, your security tokens? Maybe 2 months ago, when your dad first went into the hospital, when you were spending 24 hours a day at his bedside and could not even think about paying your own bills. Shame washed over me, hot and acidic. He offered to help, I whispered, remembering. I had been overwhelmed, drowning in medical decisions and grief. He had offered to keep the lights on for me. I had given him access to my personal accounts, and by extension, the trust account I managed. He has been siphoning money. Ellie, not big amounts. Never anything over $5,000 at a time, just enough to look like an administrative fee or a legal expense for the estate. A few thousand here, a few thousand there. But he has been doing it every week. For 8 weeks. He has stolen $60,000 from your father's legacy. Your money. I felt physically ill. He had used my father's illness, my grief, as a window of opportunity. Chloe, I said, my voice hardening. What is on Isabel's computer? That is where it gets worse. I am looking at a folder labeled Mountain Peak Holdings. It is full of wire transfer confirmations, from her personal bank account, to that secret account of his, the MP Acquisitions one. How much? A lot. $200,000 3 weeks ago, another $150,000 just last week, and I am looking at the pitch deck he sent her. A pitch deck. Oh, yes. He did not just charm her, he sold her. The future of Colorado luxury. A private, off-grid, ultra-exclusive real estate development up in the mountains. He has architectural renders, environmental impact studies, the works. He convinced her she was an angel investor in a private project that would make them both hundreds of millions. I closed my eyes. The penthouse, the new phone, the jewelry. He was using my money, my father's money, to build a facade of wealth. And he was using that facade to con his mistress out of her own fortune. Chloe, I said, a terrible, cold suspicion forming. That project, Mountain Peak Holdings. Run it. Already on it, she said. The land deeds he lists in the prospectus. The parcel numbers. I am running them through the state database now. And, oh, you bastard. What? It is a ghost project. Ilara, the land he claims to be developing. The land he owns. It does not exist. The parcel numbers are real, but they do not belong to him. They belong to the United States government. It is part of the Arapaho National Forest. You cannot build a tool shed on it, let alone a luxury development. He was not just cheating. He was not just stealing. He was a professional con artist. He was systematically defrauding both of us. He is going to bleed her dry, I said, the words tasting like ash. And then he is going to vanish. And he is using your inheritance to fund the scam, Chloe added. Then, the final sickening realization clicked into place. The photo, the one that started it all. The dinner, I whispered. The crimson quill. What about it? I thought it was a date, a celebration of their affair. I was so stupid. It was not a date. It was a business meeting. Look at the date on the last wire transfer from Isabel. I could hear Chloe's keyboard clacking. It was last week, the same day as... Oh my God, Ellie, it was the same day as your father's funeral. She wired him $150,000, I said, the picture now horribly clear. And that night, He took her to the Crimson Quill. He bought her roses and $600 champagne. He was not celebrating her. He was celebrating her investment. He was toasting the money he had just conned out of her. The betrayal was not personal. It was not a crime of passion. It was a business plan. A cold, systematic, and utterly ruthless fraud. I had not been a wife. I had been a bank, and Isabel was not a mistress. She was just the next victim in the pipeline. Chloe, I said, my voice empty of all emotion, I am going to need you to find out what else he is planning. It took less than 24 hours. I was at my kitchen table, ostensibly sorting through condolence cards, but actually mapping out Marcus's network of shell companies, when the burner phone vibrated. The name on the screen was simply Isabel. I answered. Hello. Alara Thorne. Or is it Alara Paxton? Her voice was not the smooth, confident purr from the design office. It was high-pitched, thin, and cracking with panic. Both are correct, I said, my voice flat. We need to talk. Right now. Please. It is about Marcus. I am listening. Not on the phone. Please. He tracks my phone. I think he tracks everything. We met 30 minutes later at a generic coffee shop in a strip mall, the kind of place with bad music and no atmosphere. It was neutral, anonymous, and perfect. She was huddled in a booth in the back, wearing sunglasses indoors. When she saw me, she flinched. She looked terrible. The perfect makeup was gone. Her skin was sallow, and her eyes, when she finally took the sunglasses off, were red-rimmed and terrified. She looked like she had not slept in a week. "Thank you for coming," she whispered, her hands shaking so hard she could barely hold her coffee cup. "I am here," I said, sitting down opposite her. I did not order anything. "What do you want to talk about, Isabel?" "That USB drive. I should not have. I ran the numbers, the projections you had on it. They did not make sense. So I hired a private investigator to look into the Mountain Peak project. He just called me back. He said the land is federal. He said it is a ghost project." I finished for her. "I know." Her face crumpled. How do you know?" "Marcus did not just lie to you, Isabel. He lied to me. He told me. He said you were just a family friend, an old one, that the marriage was over years ago. He said you were fragile, that you were roommates, just living together for tax purposes and appearances." Tears began to spill down her cheeks, leaving mascara tracks. "He said he was protecting you." I felt a cold, sharp pity for her, not for the affair, but for her naivete. He had played her just as thoroughly as he had played me, just with a different script. I slid my laptop out of my bag and opened it on the table. I did not need to be gentle. I needed her to be an ally. "This is not about an affair," I said, turning the screen to face her. "This is about fraud." I showed her everything. First, the bank statements from our joint account, the $50,000 transfer, the $100,000 home equity line of credit. "My money," I said. Second, I showed her the statements from my father's trust. The $60,000 in small, siphoned-off increments. "My inheritance," I said, my voice like ice. Third, I showed her the MP acquisitions account. Her wire transfers in, my stolen money in. He used my money, and my father's, to build the illusion of wealth so he could convince you he was a visionary worth investing in. I explained, my analyst voice taking over. "You were not his mistress, Isabel. You were his primary investor. You were his mark." She stared at the screen, her breath catching in a sob. "How much did he take?" I asked, my voice soft but firm. She looked at me, her eyes hollow. "Almost $500,000, she whispered, the words sounding like a death sentence. It was my entire portfolio, everything I had built. He said he would double it in 6 months. She understood. She was not the other woman. She was the main victim. He ruined me, she choked out. Not yet, I said. I closed the laptop. I do not care about the affair. I do not care who he loves. I care that he stole from my father's estate on the day he died, and I care that he is a con man. I want my money back. I want your money back, and I want him to pay for what he has done. She looked up, a new, harder light entering her eyes. How? You help me, I said, leaning in. You help me expose him, publicly and completely. I have the financial data. I have the proof, but I need to know what his next move is. I will help you file a joint civil suit. We will freeze his accounts. We will get your money back. But first, we burn his entire life to the ground. Isabel took a long, shuddering breath. She was terrified of bankruptcy. She was terrified of the public humiliation, her 1.2 million followers finding out she had been duped. He has been planning something, she said, her voice stronger now. He has been obsessed with it. It is all he talks about. What is it? The Urban Edge Designers Annual Gala. It is next week, at the Denver Art Museum. He said it was the biggest night of his life. He is being made a partner. The final, disgusting piece of the puzzle slotted into place. A partner, I repeated, tasting the word like it was poison. That position is not earned. It is bought. He has been angling for that for years. It costs at least $250,000 for the buy-in. My God, Isabel whispered. He was not just funding his project. He was using my money, and your money, to buy his promotion. Exactly, I said, a cold, thin smile touching my lips for the first time in a week. He is planning on using our stolen cash to buy his way into the company, and then he will use that position to con even bigger investors. The gala is not just a party. It is his coronation. What do we do? She asked. A coronation needs an audience, I said, my mind already running scenarios. And we are going to give him the performance of a lifetime. The gala was in 1 week. My house, which had been a quiet place of mourning, transformed into a tactical operations center. Chloe all but moved into the guest room, her array of laptops, hard drives, and portable servers turning my dining room table into a digital forensics lab. We subsisted on black coffee and a shared, silent, cold fury. My role was strategy. I was an analyst, so I analyzed. I created a document, not a story, not a journal, but a formal 30-page risk profile, complete with appendices. Title, Risk Analysis and Asset Exposure, Marcus Paxton. It was the most thorough and most personal report I had ever compiled. It detailed the fraudulent Chicago trip, the timeline of the affair, the Cherry Creek penthouse lease, the siphoning of my father's trust, and the ghost Mountain Peak Holdings project. I cross-referenced every bank statement with every lie. It was a flawless, irrefutable map of his crimes, while I built the framework of his destruction. Chloe dug deeper, into the bedrock. On the third night, her chair snapped upright. I am in, she whispered, her eyes wide, reflecting her 3 screens. I am inside the Urban Edge accounting servers. What do you see? He is not just a con man, Ilara. He is a common thief. He has been systematically embezzling from his own company for at least 18 months. She showed me. It was not even sophisticated. It was arrogant. Marcus was in charge of approving certain high-end vendor contracts. He had been inflating the invoices. He would approve a payment for, say, $80,000 for Italian marble sourcing. The vendor, a real company he was in collusion with, would get the check. The real cost was $50,000. The vendor would then kick back the overage $30,000 to a shell LLC. And I will give you one guess, Chloe said. What that LLC is called? MP Acquisitions. I read aloud. The same account he used for your money and Isabel's. He has been using his partner's money to fund his escape plan. He has been double dipping. No, triple dipping. This was the lever. This was the final critical vulnerability. The senior partners at Urban Edge were ruthless businessmen. They might, perhaps, write off a messy divorce or a personal dispute. They would never, ever tolerate an insider threat who was stealing directly from their bottom line. I could not approach them as a Lara Paxton. The emotional wife would be dismissed, handled by lawyers, and quietly paid off. I had to approach them in a language they understood, the language of risk and money. I created a new, secure email address. I drafted a communication addressed to the senior founding partner, Mr. Weatherby. I introduced myself as an independent risk management consultant. I explained, representing a concerned anonymous client who had recently uncovered significant financial irregularities at Urban Edge that posed a severe and immediate liability to the firm. I attached a single password-protected file, the teaser. It contained just 2 items. First, one inflated invoice, side by side with the vendor's actual price quote. Second, the wire transfer confirmation showing the kickback from the vendor to Marcus's shell company. I ended the email, "My full report detailing what appears to be systemic, multi-year embezzlement by a senior employee is complete. I am prepared to deliver it in person, at your convenience, to prevent further losses." I sent it at 9 a.m. At 9:05, my burner phone rang. It was Mr. Weatherby's executive assistant. Her voice was brittle with panic. "Mr. Weatherby needed to see me. Today. Now." "I am afraid my schedule is quite full," I said, my voice cool and professional. "I am flying out for a client meeting. I will not be back in Denver until next week." "Next week? But Mr. Weatherby insisted?" "I do have one small window," I interrupted. "I understand your firm is holding its annual gala at the Art Museum. I could, perhaps, stop by to present my findings to Mr. Weatherby and the other partners then. A private meeting, of course, say 8 p.m., just before the main speeches." There was a muffled sound as she put her hand over the receiver. I could hear a man's voice, Weatherby's barking in the background. She came back on, breathless. "8 p.m. is perfect. We will have a private boardroom ready for you. Thank you, Ms. I am sorry. What did you say your name was again?" "I did not," I said, and hung up. The trap was set. Isabel, to her credit, was a fantastic actress. She was terrified, but she was channeling that terror into a performance. She was the giddy, star-struck investor, calling Marcus constantly, gushing about the gala, about their future, about how proud she was of him. She encouraged him to prepare his victory speech for the partnership announcement. His ego, already colossal, was being inflated to the bursting point. He was so busy imagining his applause. He never once thought to look down. My own preparations were quieter. I met with my lawyer, the man who had handled my father's estate. When I laid out my file, he read it in silence. His face, initially full of pity for my bereavement, hardened into a mask of cold fury. By the time he finished, he had already started drafting. The divorce papers were simple, irreconcilable differences. The civil suit was a masterpiece. It was a tactical missile. It named Marcus, his shell company, and unnamed co-conspirators. It cited wire fraud, breach of fiduciary duty, and conversion. It specifically detailed the theft from my father's trust. It demanded immediate, full restitution, plus damages. My last stop was a department store. I walked past the sections of black and gray. I did not need to mourn anymore. My job was not to grieve. My job was to finish this. I found the dress. It was not black. It was a deep, dark, crimson red, the color of a ledger, of a warning, of a freshly drawn line. It was armor. I was ready for the gala. The Denver Art Museum was a temple of sharp angles and stark white walls. Tonight, it had been transformed. The main hall was flooded with a warm, golden light, filled with the sound of string music, the clinking of champagne flutes, and the self-satisfied murmur of the city's most powerful people. The air was heavy with perfume, entitlement, and the unspoken arrogance of wealth. He was in the center of it all. Of course, Marcus was in his element. He was wearing a tuxedo that was clearly custom-made, his smile bright enough to light the room. He was a king holding court, moving through the crowd, shaking hands, clapping shoulders, accepting congratulations before they had even been officially offered. He was on top of the world, a man at his absolute peak, oblivious to the fact that he was standing on a trapdoor. I arrived alone. My heels clicked on the marble floor, the sound sharp and definitive. The crimson dress felt like a second skin, like armor. Marcus saw me from across the room. His face lit up with that perfect, practiced look of spousal devotion. He broke away from a circle of architects and strode toward me, his arms open. He leaned in to kiss my cheek, a gesture of public ownership. The scent of his expensive cologne made my stomach clench. "Ilara, my love," he whispered, his voice pitched for a public audience. "I am so glad you could make it. I know how hard this all must be for you." I did not pull away. I met his gaze and smiled, a small, tight smile that did not, for a second, reach my eyes. "I would not miss this for anything in the world," I said. My voice, cold and steady as steel, made his smile flicker for a fraction of a second, but he was too arrogant, too high on his own success, to analyze the risk. He just tucked my arm into his, a prop to be displayed. Moments later, the doors opened again. Isabel Vance made her entrance. She was magnificent, playing her role with deadly precision. She wore a floor-length gown of glittering emerald silk. Her blonde hair swept up. She looked every inch the successful, beautiful partner to a visionary. I felt Marcus's hand tighten on my arm. He was nervous. His wife and his mistress, in the same room, at his moment of triumph. He looked at her, his eyes wide with a silent warning. Isabel, God bless her, was a consummate professional. She saw us. She locked eyes with Marcus. And then, she gave him a slow, deliberate wink. He relaxed instantly. The fool. He thought the wink meant, "Our secret is safe." He had no idea it meant, "Your time is up." My gaze swept the room, past the glitterati, to the cluster of men by the stage. The senior partners, Mr. Weatherby, the founder, looked ill. He was a tall, imposing man, but tonight he seemed to have shrunk. He was pale, sweating under the lights, his eyes darting frantically through the crowd. He was ignoring the people trying to shake his hand. His gaze found me. It locked on my red dress. He had seen the security photo from my consultant profile. I held his stare from across the room. I gave him no emotion, just a single, slow, deliberate nod. A flicker of pure terror passed over Weatherby's face. He gave a jerky nod in return. The trap was armed. My phone, clutched in my hand, buzzed once. A text from Chloe. "AV system is all mine. I am in the booth feed. Have fun. Boss." Chloe was outside, parked in a nondescript broadcast van, patched directly into the museum's entire technical infrastructure. She was not just monitoring the event, she was producing it. Marcus, blissfully ignorant, had already released my arm and was working the room again. He was drinking champagne. He was schmoozing. He was preparing the victory speech he had been practicing in the mirror for a week. The most important speech of his life. I let him go. I had one final task. I moved with purpose through the crowd, on an intercept course. Mr. Weatherby saw me coming and took an involuntary step back, almost tripping a waiter. I cornered him near a large, abstract painting. "Mrs. Paxton," he hissed, his voice a strained whisper. "Mr. Weatherby," I said, my voice calm and pleasant. I smiled, as if we were discussing the art. "I believe you were expecting the rest of my analysis." I reached into my small crimson clutch. His eyes widened. He thought I might be pulling out a weapon. I pulled out the second USB drive. It was sleek and red. I pressed it, firmly, into his damp, shaking palm. "This is the complete report," I murmured, my smile never wavering. "The forensic accounting on your own company's embezzlement, the wire fraud, the theft from my father's trust fund, the details of the non-existent real estate scam he used to defraud Isabel Vance, who, by the way, is the woman in the green dress. It is all there." He stared at the drive in his hand as if it were a scorpion. "They are dimming the lights for the speeches in 5 minutes," I said. "He is expecting you to go up there and make him a partner. You are about to hand the keys of your company to the man who has been robbing you blind." I leaned in, my voice dropping to a confidential whisper. "I suggest you watch the main presentation screen very, very closely." I turned and walked away, melting back into the crowd, leaving him to stare at the small red device that contained the complete and total implosion of my husband's life. The lights in the great hall began to dim. The bright, warm glow was replaced by a cooler, blue stage lighting. The chatter of the crowd faded, and a respectful hush fell. A spotlight found the podium. Mr. Weatherby, looking like a man walking to his own execution, stepped onto the stage. He looked a decade older than he had an hour ago. He clutched the sides of the podium, his knuckles white. "Good evening," he started, his voice rough. He cleared his throat. "Good evening. Welcome to the Urban Edge Annual Gala. We gather tonight to celebrate success, to celebrate vision." He paused, looking down at his notes, but I knew he was not reading. "But success," he continued, his voice strained, "is nothing without integrity. A company is built on a foundation, and that foundation must be truth. It must be accountability." A confused murmur rippled through the audience. This was not the celebratory, back-slapping speech they were expecting. This was a funeral. Weatherby looked up, his eyes sweeping the crowd until they found Marcus. "And now, it is my honor to introduce a man who has been a driving force at Urban Edge, a man with a bold vision for the future. Please welcome Marcus Paxton." The applause was thunderous. The crowd, relieved to be past the strange, dark speech, was electric. Marcus practically bounded onto the stage. He was soaking it in. He shook Weatherby's hand, who pulled away from the contact as if he had been burned. Marcus, oblivious, turned to the audience, spreading his arms wide. He flashed his $1,000,000 smile. He was a conqueror. "Thank you," he boomed, his voice full of charisma and fake humility. "Thank you so much. What a night. What a journey." He let the applause die down. He looked out into the crowd, and his eyes found me, right in the front, in my red dress. "It has been a long road," he said, his voice softening, becoming intimate, despite the microphone. "And I could not have done it without the support of so many people in this room. But there is one person I have to thank, my beloved wife, Alara." He pointed to me. The spotlight swung, blinding me for a second, and the entire room turned to look at the grieving wife. "She has always been my rock," Marcus continued, his voice thick with emotion. "And especially these past few weeks, through her own, impossibly difficult time. She has been the definition of strength and grace. Thank you, my love." I smiled. I held that smile. I looked right at him, and I nodded. A slow, deliberate acknowledgement. He smiled back, full of triumph. He had just proven to the entire room what a devoted husband he was. He turned back to the crowd. "And now, I want to talk about the future," he declared. "Because the future of Urban Edge is not just about buildings. It is about Mountain Peak Holdings. It is about bold new projects that will redefine the skyline of this city. It is about—" He kept talking, but I was not listening to his words. I was watching the massive 20-foot screen behind his head. It had been displaying the stylized, tasteful Urban Edge Designers logo. As he said the words, "Bold New Projects," the logo flickered. It vanished. The screen went black for 1 second. Marcus did not notice. He was in the rhythm of his speech, his hands gesturing. It is about a vision that... Then, the screen lit up. It was not the logo. It was my photograph, the one I took from the street, standing in my funeral suit. It was Marcus, in his dapper vest. It was Isabel, in her elegant dress. It was the two of them, their champagne flutes raised in a toast. It was the massive bouquet of red roses. It was the window of the crimson quill. And in the bottom corner, in a simple, white, digital font, put there by Chloe, was the timestamp. October 19th, 2:15 p.m., the date and time of my father's funeral. The crowd went silent. Not a polite hush. It was a vacuum. The sound was sucked from the room so fast it was almost violent. The only sound was Marcus, still talking. A vision of total integration, and... He faltered. He sensed the change. The energy in the room had not just died, it had inverted. He stopped speaking. The silence was now absolute. "What?" he said, with a nervous laugh. "Cat got your tongue." No one laughed. A woman in the front row, a prominent city councilwoman, was staring at the screen with her mouth open. Slowly. Confused. Marcus turned around. He looked up at the 20-foot-tall image of his own betrayal. His face, it was a masterpiece of physics. Every drop of blood drained from it. His $1,000,000 smile did not fade. It froze. It cracked. It became a grotesque, rigid grimace. His eyes, wide with disbelief, flickered between the screen and the audience, trying to understand what was happening. He stared at the timestamp. I watched his mind work, watched him process the date, the time, watched him realize, in public, in front of his partners, his clients, and his wife, what that image meant. He turned back to the microphone, his body stiff. He tried to laugh it off. "Well," he stammered, his voice a dry croak. That is not the right file. That is a design misunderstanding. A concept render for a client." Was it a misunderstanding? Marcus, the voice, my voice, sliced through the stunned silence. It was amplified, cold, and clear. I was standing at a second podium, one that had been placed on the ballroom floor near the front, illuminated by my own stark white spotlight. The entire room swiveled, their eyes moving from the broken man on the stage to me. Marcus spun around, his face a mask of waxy horror. "Alara, what are you doing? This is not the time. We can talk about this at home." "We are done talking at home, Marcus," I said, my voice echoing in the vast, silent hall. "You said that was a design misunderstanding, but that design happened on October 19th, at 2:15 in the afternoon, while I was burying my father." A collective gasp, a shockwave of sound rippled through the crowd. "Chloe," I said, speaking into the microphone, "show them the next one." The screen behind Marcus, the screen he could not escape, changed. The photo vanished. It was replaced by a bank statement. My father's trust fund. Red circles appeared, highlighting transfers, one after another. $4,000, $5,000, $3,000. Or perhaps this is a misunderstanding, I asked. "That is $60,000. Marcus, stolen, from my father's estate. You siphoned it out, piece by piece, while I was sitting in the hospital, while I was planning a funeral, while I was trusting you." He shook his head, mute, his eyes wide. "Show them the next slide," I commanded. The screen changed again. A new, complex image, a flow chart. It showed my joint account. It showed Isabel's personal account. It showed the Urban Edge vendor accounts. And it showed arrows, dozens of arrows, all pointing in one direction, funneling money into a single box at the center. A shell company. MP Acquisitions. Or maybe this is a design concept, I continued, my voice merciless. That is a map, everyone. A map of the fraud. That is my money. That is Isabel Vance's money. And that is his partner's money, all going into his secret pocket. The bold new project he was talking about, it was him. Marcus was done. He was not a speaker. He was not a visionary. He was a trapped animal. He turned from the screen, his face ashen, and made a dash for the side of the stage. He was going to run. But as he reached the stairs, 2 large men in immaculate black suits stepped into his path. They were not museum staff. They were the security I had hired. They did not touch him. They just stood there, arms crossed, solid, immovable. He was trapped. He took $500,000 from me. A new voice, a shriek from the crowd. Isabel Vance, in her emerald dress, was on her feet, her face pale but furious. A second spotlight, courtesy of Chloe, found her. He promised me a project, Mountain Peak Holdings. He took my money, almost $500,000, for a project that does not even exist. The ballroom was in chaos. People were standing, their phones out, recording. The whispers were a roar. Marcus backed away from the guards, back to the center of the stage, cornered. He looked to the one man he thought could save him. "Mr. Weatherby, sir," he pleaded, his voice cracking. "This is a domestic dispute. It is a misunderstanding. It is all lies." Mr. Weatherby, who had been standing frozen by the side of the stage, suddenly turned a deep, dangerous shade of purple. He strode across the stage and ripped the microphone from Marcus's hand. "A lie!" Weatherby roared, the feedback screaming through the speakers. "You think this is a lie. I have the report. I have seen the invoices you have been embezzling from this firm, from my firm. For 18 months, you have stolen hundreds of thousands of dollars from your own partners." He pointed a shaking finger at Marcus. "Marcus Paxton, you are fired." The words, "You are fired," echoed, absolute and final. Marcus stumbled backward as if he had been physically struck. He looked finished, but I was not. I started to walk. I moved from my podium, my red heels clicking on the marble floor. I walked up the stage steps. I walked past my security team. I walked past the apoplectic Mr. Weatherby. I walked directly to the podium where my husband was standing, broken and trembling. He looked at me, his eyes empty, pleading. "Ilara, please, we can fix this. I can." I looked down at him. Not with hate, not with love, with nothing. The risk had been identified, analyzed, and neutralized. I reached into my crimson clutch bag. I pulled out a thick, folded stack of papers. I did not throw them. I placed them deliberately, calmly, on the podium, right on top of his speech notes. "Marcus," I said. My voice was quiet, but the microphone was still on, and it carried my every word. "This is our divorce agreement." He stared at the papers. I reached into the clutch again. I pulled out a second, thicker sheaf of documents. I placed them directly on top of the first. "And this," I said, "is the civil suit. It was filed 1 hour ago. For wire fraud, embezzlement, breach of fiduciary duty, and the full and total recovery of every cent you stole from me, and from my father." He looked at the papers. He looked at me. He had nothing left. And at that exact moment, as if on cue, the main doors of the ballroom swung open. The chaotic noise of the crowd died instantly. The only sound was the heavy, rhythmic click of boots on the marble floor. 2 uniformed police officers, their faces set, walked directly toward the stage. The crowd parted for them. They stopped at the foot of the stairs, their eyes scanning the scene. One of them, the senior officer, looked up at me, the woman in the red dress, standing at the center of the wreckage. "Ma'am," he called out, his voice full of authority. Are you Alara Paxton? I turned. I looked down at the officer. Yes, I am, I replied, my voice clear and steady. I raised my hand, not to wave, but to point. I pointed directly at the hollow shell of the man who had been my husband. And this, I said, is the man you are looking for fraud, theft, and embezzlement. Thank you so much for listening to my story. I have to know. Where are you tuning in from? Let me know in the comments so we can connect and share our thoughts. Please subscribe to Lily Revenge Stories, give this video a big like, and if you really want to support the channel, smash that hype button so this story can be heard by even more people.